Am I the only one who has a lot of opinions about the underwear in Baldur's Gate 3? Alright, we're talking about butts today, so keep that in mind as you watch. This one's gonna be a little not safe for work. Anyway, the underwear is nice and looks great and whatever, but I feel like there are a lot of implications that come hand in hand with having characters like Minthara, for example, wear sexy little lingerie underneath her armor as she gets ready to slaughter a village of innocent tiefling children. I can't be the only one who's thought about that, right? Alright, I'm gonna be honest with you. The underwear in Baldur's Gate 3 has sent me down something of a rabbit hole that I have not been able to crawl out of. There's an aspect to it surrounding sexuality and how video game characters express their sexuality, yes. But if you think about it, underwear's function isn't exclusively sexual. The emphasis that the game has on its underwear also implies a lot about its characters as people that's not implied in any other game that I can think of, because other games don't really put much of an emphasis on it. Like, does Astarion have a favorite pair of the little briefs he wears? I mean, obviously, look at him. Alright, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let's get ready to undress some Barbie and Ken dolls, get intimate with their intimates, and talk all about the underwear in Baldur's Gate 3. Welcome back to Gaming Literacy 101. What am I doing? This is a little too loud on the mic, so it's coming off, but appreciate that I wore it. Things I do for you all. So, I'm not sure if you've ever noticed, but video games have a really weird relationship with sex, in the way that it's presented in-game and also simultaneously received by audiences. If I was a better writer, I'd have a good 69 joke about that right here, but I'll just leave it to you to fill in the blanks. I think the strange relationship games have with sex has a lot to do with the hang-ups that a lot of people have with sex as a whole, whether that's based on religious or cultural backgrounds, or just the fact that it's kind of a taboo subject in a lot of circles. But regardless of the reason why, games that feature characters having sex are frequently at the center of controversy. As far as I've seen, Baldur's Gate 3 has largely avoided any sort of mainstream outrage. It certainly didn't prompt Fox News to interview Jeff Keighley about it like when the original Mass Effect came out. Yes, that really happened.
Yeah, that's completely incorrect. First of all, you can actually play as a man or a woman in the game. Cooper, have you ever played Mass Effect?
Can you believe he hosts the Game Awards now? Anyway, a lot of people have had a lot to say about the way that Baldur's Gate 3 handles sex and sexuality, and I think there's a lot of great reading to be done on it. If you're looking for some extra credit, I'd recommend reading articles like Zackery Cuevas' piece for PC Mag titled Inclusive, Provocative, and Downright Horny, Baldur's Gate 3 Gets Sex Right. Kenneth Shepard's piece for Kotaku titled The Industry is Divided on How to Write Video Game Romance, and Jervon Perkins' piece for DualShockers, Represent, titled The Non-Binary Experience in Baldur's Gate 3 Totally Rocks. All of those articles are linked in the description below, so check them out if you want some great stuff on the topic. But no one's really talked at length about the underwear in the game, which to me is one of the most fascinating and unique parts of Baldur's Gate 3. There have been plenty of games to feature nudity and sex scenes, none I'd argue as good as Baldur's Gate 3, but I can't find any other mainstream game that lets you equip and unequip your character's underwear, at least without modding. Because it's an equipable item that's in each character's inventory, there's a certain amount of focus that the developers at Larian Studios must want the player to have on it. And as I mentioned before, it has been the sole focus in my mind every single time I play the game because of the implications that it has about each character's, well, character. It humanizes the entire cast of Baldur's Gate 3 in a way that feels really personal, not just because you're seeing them without their clothes on, but because there's a level of charming human relatability to just wearing underwear. We frequently build up characters in our minds as larger than life because they're doing these fantastical acts, but Baldur's Gate 3 reminds us that they also get wedgies sometimes. Because why wouldn't they? I mean, look at what Lae'zel wears underneath her armor. You're trying to tell me that those leather straps don't ride up when she's running around Faerun? Do you think she has multiple sets of the same leather harness thing, or are there other designs that she wears? Does she maybe just prefer the feel of leather on her skin over softer, more breathable materials, since her skin seems to be different from humans? What does Lae'zel's skin feel like? Do all Githyanki prefer wearing leather over textiles that humans like? Do you see how this small, seemingly insignificant detail does a lot to make us interested and ask questions about the world and characters of Baldur's Gate 3? The reason this works so well, in my opinion, is because the game already has excellent writing. It already has me invested and wondering about the ins and outs of Lae'zel's life and her journey with her faith and people, since she's written and performed so well. Because we like learning about the greater strokes of the cast's lives, we're also interested in these smaller details, not just the life and death stuff. Their underwear, to me, serves as a fantastic open door for speculation on who the cast of Baldur's Gate 3 is when the action stops and no one's watching them. In general, we learn a lot about a person based on what they're wearing, and underwear specifically is such a personal look into how someone feels about themselves, since most other people aren't meant to see it. Sure, there are times when we wear special underwear because we know it'll be seen, but that doesn't really apply to the cast of Baldur's Gate 3, since I don't know if anyone was planning on getting down before they were swept into a world-saving adventure. Because none of the underwear is worn for anyone else's eyes, as far as we know, we get an honest look at how the cast thinks of themselves in isolation, and what they might like. For example, Minthara is kind of a murderous asshole when you first meet her, but she still made sure to wear a bra that matches her nice lavender skin color. What I like so much about that is that it makes Minthara a much more complicated and potentially sympathetic character. The purple color of her cute matching underwear set is a reminder that her life extends far outside of her time in the goblin camp that you first meet her in. She woke up that morning and picked out underwear that made her feel good and comfortable, that matches her whole sort of aesthetic, which also tells us that she has an eye for that sort of design thing. The cycle of questions continues. Is purple Minthara's favorite color? How else does she express her aesthetic through her clothing and general presentation? What sort of background does she have with aesthetics? The implications to her character are also fleshed out thanks to this small detail. I don't know a single woman who owns exclusively matching underwear sets, so Minthara must have made the active choice to feel nice and match today. Maybe that's because when you meet her, she's about to go on a huge raid against the Emerald Grove and wanted to have a secret pep in her step, the kind we all get when we wear our favorite delicates. As terrible as Minthara is when you first meet her, don't you kind of find that a little charming? I think similar questions and inferences can be asked and made about the way that each character has their pubic hair styled or cut, but I know for a fact that if I start talking about that, I will get fired for sure, so you're welcome to do your own speculation there. Maybe let me know in the comments. There's some engagement for you, YouTube. The Baldur's Gate 3 underwear rabbit hole goes deeper than just realizing that even the most murderous party members in the game have a favorite pair of underwear, since there's a lot of other baggage that comes hand in hand with being a person who simply wears undergarments. Like, you have to wash underwear, you know? Washing clothes is, to me, a really boring chore that's just about the low point of every week. But it is something relatable because literally everyone has to do it. So Will, the Blade of the Frontiers, also has to do his laundry between slicing goblin throats. He's gotta wash his underwear, otherwise, how else is he gonna seduce me? Do you see what I'm saying here? I think someone might try and argue with me, someone who clearly hates having fun little conversations like this, and say, most characters wear clothes of some kind in video games, but I don't see you falling down a deep rabbit hole because of that. And while I do agree that the clothes a character wears in any game tells us at least something about them, underwear specifically is just such a personal thing that tells us a lot of small character details like the ones I've been mentioning. Yes, the idea of a character doing their laundry isn't exclusively tied to underwear, but because it's such a mundane, humanizing article of clothing, there's a stronger connection to the mundane, humanizing tasks that come hand in hand with it. Okay, time to talk about something that's completely unflattering and potentially kind of gross, so come with me here. There are a lot of different reasons why we as people wear underwear. Self-expression, chafing prevention, protecting our genitals from the harsh zippers that we keep right next to them on our pants. But one of the most important reasons why we don't just go commando all the time is because we all shit and fart and piss. Can I say that here? Who cares? I'm like a cool teacher who dresses up for lessons sometimes. The metaphor here is getting away from me a little bit. Sorry, back to the shit talk. One of underwear's main functions is to keep our outer clothes clean from drippage? Sorry, there's no non-gross way to say this, but as you know, because you're also a person, our genitals and butts don't cleanly evacuate our bodies of all their waste. So there's bound to be a little bit of mess that gets trapped in our various holes and crevices. Underwear stops that excess waste from staining our outer clothes, which is the completely unsexy reality about the sexiest thing that we can wear. As I said, there are a lot of reasons why we wear underwear, but this function is perhaps one of the most important reasons. So why even mention this? Well, because as sexy as the cast of Baldur's Gate 3 is, the fact that they all wear underwear is a straightforward reminder that they too shit and fart and piss, just like the rest of us. And isn't that kind of nice in a humanizing way? Because no matter what sort of crazy, fantastical lives they live, they're still able to be related to, since like, hey, I shit and fart and piss too. There's a certain level of demystification that happens as a result of knowing that the heroes and villains of Baldur's Gate 3 just shit and fart and piss. It's Larian's willingness to address the ins and outs of daily life, the small, unromantic things that make us human, that really makes their characters and world come to life for me. The underwear tells us so much about the cast and serves to ground them in reality just a little bit more. The final thing I like about the underwear in the game is that, well, it's hot. All of the characters look great in what they've got. There's a fair amount of sex that you can have with the different characters in Baldur's Gate 3, and Larian did their due diligence at making those scenes work and feel natural and safe. And one of the things that really makes it work for me is that everyone looks great when the clothes start peeling off. I don't have much to say about it other than just like, look at them. There's a reason why everyone has the hots for the entire cast of the game, and I think that part of that is because Larian knew how to dress them up as they undress in a way that's really appealing. Now, there's not a ton of it that I've seen, but you can actually buy underwear that looks like the stuff that the characters wear in-game on Etsy and stuff like that. That's how much people like what Baldur's Gate 3 has got going on under its layers of robes and plate mail armor. There's really only one downside to the way that the game handles its underwear, and it's that you can't put male characters in traditionally female outfits and vice versa. If you do, the underwear magically warps to be the cut of whatever the style of their underwear was before, and I think that's kind of a shame. Not only does it exclude people making trans characters who might have traditionally masc bodies but prefer to wear traditionally femme underwear, but it cuts out some potentially saucy role-playing as well. For example, if you wanted your character to swap undies as a sort of under-the-clothes trophy with whoever you've been having sexual adventures with at night while the rest of the cast is sleeping, you can certainly do that, but it's not going to be an exact copy of what they were wearing, so it almost feels like a completely different piece of clothing. Like, I can't just give Karlach my elves boxer briefs to wear as a symbol of our burning passion. Yes, that was a bad pun.
Well, I still have your underwear.
I still have your virginity.
Even with these limitations, though, it is kind of fun to have your party switch their underwear around like you're some big group of traveling polygamists. It makes Baldur's Gate 3 feel just a little bit more saucy, and like your party has this big secret that they're not going to tell anyone. There's a great article on The Gamer by Stacey Henley that goes in more depth about the way that the underwear in Baldur's Gate 3 changes and warps depending on who's wearing what, that I'd recommend reading if you're looking for more discussion on the topic. It's the only thing I found, by the way, that talks about the game's underwear, so thanks, Stacey, for standing with me and doing the real reporting. I feel like there's still a big question mark that's hanging over this entire discussion. It's something that we sort of address when talking about the characters in-game doing their laundry, but it's a question I want to talk about. What sets Baldur's Gate 3 apart from every other game with underwear in it? I myself wondered this when I first started down this rabbit hole. A lot of other RPGs let the player choose what they want to wear, whether that's armor or clothes or robes or whatever. And with that choice often comes the ability to just take everything off. I feel like there are two camps that games usually fall into. Your character either has their underwear painted on their body that cannot be removed, or when you take your pants off, you're just free balling it for the entire world to see. Let's talk about the painted on underwear first. While this might sound like semantics to a certain extent, I think that the lack of interactivity or address of the underwear in-game makes it a lot less interesting. In a game like Skyrim, for example, everyone has the same boring burlap sack ass underwear. No matter who it is, a jarl or a peasant, if you take off all their clothes, usually from killing them, they'll be wearing the same thing. To me, it's a complete non-factor when it comes to building the world and its characters, since it tells me virtually nothing about either thing other than that just everyone wears the same underwear. A character doesn't secretly wear sexy purple and silver lingerie underneath their armor that informs their character, like in Baldur's Gate 3. A game that takes this approach, like Skyrim, doesn't make me wonder about the texture preferences its characters have because everyone's got the same thing. It's missing that deeper level of immersion for me. The second approach to underwear in RPGs that I've seen is the completely naked method. This is found in games like Cyberpunk 2077, although many games like this have the option to turn nudity off, which results in the painted on underwear for everyone. In Cyberpunk, if you take your pants off, your junk is just there, hanging out, and it drives me insane. This method does get me to wonder about the characters and their junk, but for all the wrong reasons. Now, I'm thinking about how uncomfortable it must be to ride a motorcycle while in combat pants, totally commando, or run for your life through gunfire while your junk is just mashing on your zipper. I hate it. I hate it so much. In fact, when I see that a game does this, I actually have to put it out of my mind completely. Otherwise, I literally can't enjoy the game. I can't take any in-game conversation seriously if I'm thinking about how the seam in V's pants are probably really uncomfortable. Maybe it's just implied that you put underwear on with the pants, but I had that glitch at launch where V's dick clips through the front of his jeans, so I know that's just not the case. Baldur's Gate 3 sets itself apart from both of these options when nudity is turned on by making underwear an equipable item that's in your inventory. As I've talked about, this small, seemingly insignificant thing adds a lot when it comes to rounding out these small, relatable details of the world, and I love it. It tells us so much about its characters and makes them human. Well, not all of them are human, but you know what I mean. Sex in media is such a weird thing. We've been seeing a movement of people crying out for less sex scenes in movies and TV and games, and while I can understand certain aspects of that, like if you live with your parents and you don't want them seeing this every single time you hit a loading screen in GTA, what I think Baldur's Gate 3 does is show a great example of what sex can be in media. Obviously, the sex scenes in the game are hot and steamy, which is great, but the inclusion of details like the underwear adds another layer to it. Sex isn't just what's shown in movies and porn. It's not hot and heavy all the time. It's human, which means it's imperfect and messy, both figuratively and literally. There are a lot of realities to being a person, and being a person that has sex that are a little too real for most media. But Baldur's Gate 3 embraces all aspects of it, both the hot and heavy, and the human. Now, I don't think every RPG from here on out needs to feature underwear so prominently. I think it fits really well with Baldur's Gate 3 thanks to its propensity for having its characters undress, let's say. But I do think it would be a good idea for other games to figure out how they can have their own underwear. Something that's a small detail that might not ever come into play mechanically, but still says something about the world. Maybe everyone has tattoos or something. Nothing that's meant to be like a whole thing, you know? Just small details that can send me down a rabbit hole of overthinking their entire existence and implications. It makes for better worlds, and also, hey, it gives me something to talk about. So, what do you think? Are there any other details like this in gaming that send you spiraling? Make sure to let me know in the comments down below. YouTube. Algorithm. You get it. Now, class dismissed. Like and subscribe.